Okay, today's daf is Masechta Baba Basra, daf Kuf Yud, and we will begin with the bottom of daf Kuf Tes Amid Beis. And the Gemara is discussing, got off a little bit off on a tangent. This parak is discussing inheritance and the order of inheritance. Who takes precedence of inheritance? As you know, a son takes precedence over an uncle when it comes to the inheritance. Son takes precedence over a sister, and we're going to learn more about that in the Gemara. But the Gemara got off on a tangent about it, that you got to be careful who you marry because it affects the children. So the Gemara says, Amar Abelazar says, very interesting thing. You have two brothers, two tzaddikim, that they both married. You would think they both married right, Moshe and Aaron, and yet Moshe's grandchildren went, so to speak, off the derech. The Gemara says, "La'olam yidbak odam b'toivim." A person should attach himself with a good family in marriage. Why? So we're going to compare the two people. Shahare Moshe Rabbeinu Shenasa Bas Yisroi. He married the daughter of Yisroi, Tzipora. So again, the family around Yisroi was not so good. So Yotzo Mimena Yehonasan. The grandson of Moshe Rabbeinu was Yehonasan, who was mentioned before in the Gemara, that he was a priest serving idols in the time of the Shoftim. So therefore, so to speak, he went off the derech. He came back on the derech, but he took a powerful position during the time when the Jewish people were worshiping idols in the days of the Shoftim. So that was a grandson of Moshe Rabbeinu. Aaron, Shenosa Bas Aminadav, Aaron, who married the daughter of Aminadav, right? His wife came from the family of Aminadav. Yotzim Pinchas, his grandson was Pinchas. So that's the Gemara says that Pinchas was the grandson of Aaron, and his son Elazar had this great kid Pinchas. It's all because Aaron chose a good wife when he got married. Says the Gemara, a question: Will Pinchas lav mi Yisroi Osi? Didn't Pinchas himself come from Yisroi? Pinchas, it means Pinchas. Who is Pinchas's father? Elazar, the son of Aaron, and he married somebody from the family of Yisroi. So, and we see he became a good, he was a tzaddik. Well, the pasuk says, "Elazar ben Aaron lokach loy mi b'nois Putiel loy liisha." Elazar, the son of Aaron, married somebody from the daughters of Putiel for a wife. Now, who's Putiel? My love, doesn't this mean he married somebody? His wife, Elazar's wife, was somebody who came from Yisroi, the awesome Yisroi, who came from Yisroi, and before Yisroi became a Jew, his job was shapitim agolim l'avodah zarah. He stuffed and fattened calves for avodah zarah, for idol worship. That was his job. So Elazar married somebody from Yisro's family, and nevertheless, she had a son, or tzaddik. Answers the Gemara, loy, it's not so. The asum Yosef shepit Yisroi. Putiel means that Elazar, the son of Aaron, married somebody from Putiel. Putiel means somebody who coming from Shevet Yosef, who was pitput. He made light of his Yetzer Hara. In other words, he made fun of his Yetzer Hara in order to conquer it. So therefore, again, Elazar didn't marry Yisroi. He married somebody from the family of Yosef. So it's understandable why he had a son, Pinchas. Says the Gemara, that's not true. The Shvatim, the rest of the Jewish people, were shaming Pinchas. They would say, Reisim ben Puti zeh, would you see this Ben, the son of Puti? That means this Pinchas, who comes from the family of Puti, was Ben Shepitim Avi Imay Agom L'Avodah Zarah. His paternal grandfather was fattening calves for Avodah Zarah. And this guy, because he has it in his blood of killing, because his grandfather was a cruel person, to fatten a cow, you have to be somewhat cruel. Yarig Nasi Eved Shevet Misrael. That's what gave him the courage to kill a president of the Shevet of one of the Shvatim of the Jewish people, which is Shevet Shimon. So we see that Pinchas the way they would, talk about him, they would talk about him that his grandfather came from Shevet Yisrael. So we see that Pinchas did come from Shevet Yisrael. Now we go to the top of Kuf Yud. Ella says the Gemara, the truth is like this. He did come from Shevet Yisrael, but not totally from Shevet Yisrael. Ella avua if his father came from, if his paternal grandfather was from Yosef, then Ima di Ima, his paternal grandmother, his maternal grandmother, came from Yisrael. Avia di Ima Yisrael, if the paternal grandfather came from Yisrael, Ima di Ima, his maternal grandmother came from Yosef. In other words, he came from two families. He came from Yosef and Yisrael. So therefore, Pinchas wasn't affected so much because he still had a little bit of Yosef in him, as opposed to Moshe, who married Yisroel's daughter. So it's understandable that the next generation, Gershon's son, who had this boy, Yehona's son, would go off the derech and become a priest for Avodah Zarah. And I'll prove it to you that Pinchas himself came from a family of Yisroi and Yosef. The Ksiv, it says in the pasuk, Mibnois Putiel, that Elazar, the son of Aaron, who was the father of Pinchas, married the daughters of Putiel. Putiel is spelled with an extra yud. So Tarti, there's two people called Puti. Puti means to, make light of or fatten. It must, he came from both sides. From both sides, either he was both from Yosef and from Yisroi, but he wasn't totally from Yisroi, and that's why Lazar was able to have this great kid, Pinchas, and all because his father, Aaron, took somebody special for a wife, the daughter of Aminadav. I don't know if this Gemara applies Bisman Azeh. I just want to tell you that very often you will have a great tzaddik marrying a great tzaddikus from a great family, and they'll end up with a child who's a rasha. And sometimes I've seen this as a person who's not learned and at all, semi come from, and he ends up with a boy that's a tzaddik. So in the time that we are living in, it's very hard to make these straight out indications to determine how the kids are going to turn out. Nevertheless, the Gemara continues on to that theme. Amar Rava said, "Hanoisi isha, if you're marrying a wife, sarech sheyivdak ba'acheha, you have to investigate who the potential wife's brother is, because you want to make sure that if you're marrying somebody, your kids are going to be all right. And therefore, if your wife's brother is a good guy, you can assume your kids are going to be great kids. Shenema, because the pasuk says, "Vayikach Aaron es Elisheva bas Aminadav." Aaron took this daughter of Aminadav, as we said, her name was Elisheva. Achois, the sister, she was the sister of Nachshon. Now we already told you he was Aminadav's daughter. So of course, Aminadav's other son was Nachshon. We know that elsewhere. So Nachshon, so why does the Torah have to indicate that Elisheva was the sister of Nachshon? Once I know that she's the daughter of Aminadav, don't I know that she's the sister of Nachshon? Why do we say that Elisheva was the sister of Nachshon? And again, Nachshon was, if you remember, was the first one to jump into the Kriyas Yamsuf. So he's a great tzaddik. So, but the whole point of this pasuk is to teach you a concept in life. That if you marry a woman, you have to check out the brothers. And that will be an indication of how your kids will come out. Because Tana, we learned in a Braisa, most of the kids will be similar to the brother of the mother. I think that's most of a physical thing. The body of the boys will be more like the mother's side of the family most of the time, and therefore, in order for part of the shidduch investigation is to check out how the brothers are, and what they're all about. Then the pasuk describes how when the people were asking a question to Yehona's son. Why are you serving Avodah Zarah? Why are you acting like a priest for Avodah Zarah? Look where you come from. The Pasuk in Shoftim says, Vayesuru, Shama Vayoyma, Mi Hevi Acha Aloim. Who brought you here? Mi Ata Isa. What are you doing? Ma Ata Isa Bezeh. What are you doing here? In this over here with this Malach Hapai. And what are you are at Malach Hapai? What are you here? So basically, they said the same questions with different languages, but all meaning the same thing. They were asking, "What's your position here?" But the Navi does not tell you what the people were really asking Yonasan, the grandson of Moshe Rabbeinu. Amrulai, but the Chazal tell us this was their question. Lav mi Moshe Kasas, don't you come from Moshe Rabbeinu? Diksiv husbei atikra haloim. It says by Moshe Rabbeinu, don't come haloim, don't get too close to Har Sinai, Hashem told. So that they were indicating you're a grandson of Moshe Rabbeinu. That's why it says haloim. Lav mi Moshe Kasas, don't you come from Moshe Rabbeinu? God told Moshe Rabbeinu, what's in your hand? The stick. So again, they were indicating again, reminding him, you come from Moshe Rabbeinu. Lav mi Moshe Ka'asis. They gave him 3 reminders. You come from Moshe. That you should stay with me. That the rest of the Jewish people could go back home and you stay in for another 40 days. Basically, they gave him 3 hints to him that you come from Moshe Rabbeinu. And therefore, they asked him a question: Te'asa kohen l'Avodah Zarah. You should become a priest for the Avodah Zarah. So really, Yonasan had a real excuse why he sold himself out to the Avodah Zarah people. Amalahem, he needed a living. Kach mukablani mibeis avi abba. I have a tradition from my grandfather Moshe Rabbeinu that la'olam. It's so this is a not just a, you would think that this is a modern, Rebbe telling the student, but here it's from Moshe Rabbeinu. La'olam yasko adam asma l'avodah zarah. Person should hire himself out to worship, to serve, not to serve in a avodah zarah house, while yitzdarach lebrius, and don't take welfare basically. So do what you can, even if it's you're working in a tumadiga place. So who savar? So Yonasan said, "L'avodah zarah mamish. I'm going to be serving in the avodah zarah. I have no other way to get a job." Apparently, he couldn't get a job, so the only one that hired him was here. So therefore, he worked there. Maybe he didn't fully believe in what he was doing, but I acted as a priest for the avodah zarah. So, but the Gemara says v'loihi. That's not what Moshe Rabbeinu meant. Ella avodah zarah means avodah zarah loy. Avodah zarah means don't go worship avodah zarah, don't be a priest for avodah zarah, but hire yourself out to do something that's you're not comfortable with, right? At least you don't have to go on to public welfare. Avodah zarah loy, a job that's strange to you, that doesn't fit your temperament. Kid amri le Rav Kahana. Rav told Rav Kahana. That means you're such a great person, you're a big Talmud Chacham, Rav Kahana, but Rav told him, Netoish nevelto b'shuka u'shol kol agra, skin an avela in the street, make hides or whatever, a carcass in the street, and make a wage. Hires himself out. Don't say, Gava Rabbana, I'm a great person, Vizili Be Milsa, and it's shameful for me to hire myself out. It's shameful for me to do such a job. Again, don't go on to public welfare if there's still a possibility you could do something, a job, even if you're uncomfortable for you. So, Kevin Shara'a David. So therefore, that's it. So Kevin Shara'a David, when David saw Yehonason's job, Shemam and Chavav Allah b'Yoseh, that he's very careful and frugal when it comes to money. So later on in his life, Minoha ala Eitzrus, David HaMelech gave him a job in his cabinet, and he put him on to be the secretary treasury of his new kingdom. So he didn't remain in the Avodah Zarah, in worshiping Avodah Zarah. Shenama, the pasuk says, Ushvuel ben Gershom ben Menashe nogid al ha'Eitzrus. It says that David HaMelech put this person called Shavuel, the son of Gershom. So the Gemara asks a question, Gershom's son was Yehonasan. Shavuel Shemai, was his name Shavuel? Vala Yohaneson Shema. Yohaneson was his name. I guess when he got the new job in David HaMelech's cabinet as treasury secretary, he changed his name to Shmuel. So why did he change his name to Shmuel? Because Gershom only had one son, so it must have been this Yonasan. Rabbi Yochanan Sheshav Lekel B'chol Libai. He returned to God with his entire heart, and therefore, that's why he was called Shavu Kel. So he didn't remain with this Avodah Zarah job. But the truth is that the as explained by the Mefarshim, he didn't remain because in this job for the rest of his life. When Shlomo Melech took over after David Melech, he fired him. And when the Shmuel Yonasan got fired, he went back to serving the Avodah Zarah. So he went back to being a priest for Avodah Zarah, and that's how he ended his life. So it's interesting to know what happened to the grandkids of yeah. I know the source of Mary Marmai. Very good. Yeah, excellent. Excellent. Comes from a great family. Fabulous. I just want to say that I knew some great Talmidei Chachamim in Queens. Especially, I knew one very well, who was the rabbi of the conservative shul, and he was a big Talmud Chacham, learned well and everything like that, but needed a living, and so that's what his job was. And he would come during the weekdays to daven in our regular shul and lane for us. You don't find that anymore. Anyway, v'habonim esav, a son inherits the father. Minomla, how do you know that the son inherits his father? Only sons, and even if there's a sister, the son gets the whole inheritance. How do you know that concept? So the Gemara says, the Pasuk says, Ish kiyamas, when a man dies, Tama de ein le ben. It's only because he has no son. Hayesh le ben, if he does have a son, ben kaidem. The Torah says, if a man doesn't have a son, then you give it to the daughter. But if there's a son, even if there's a daughter, you give it to the son. So that's what the Gemara darshans. Amalera Papa Abayas. Papa said to Abaya, Ema made, let us say, I'ika ben, that if there's a son, there's ben, then the son inherits. Ika bas, there's bas. If there's only a daughter, then the daughter inherits. But maybe the Chumash agrees to this idea. Ika benu bas, loy hilaris, loy hilaris. If there's a son and daughter, then nobody gets the Yerusha. It goes to nobody. And it's exeris akasav that nobody would get the Yerusha. Because there's two children, a son and a daughter. So the Gemara doesn't like that idea. Ve'ela, as we go to Amabez, man geras, who should inherit if there's a son and a daughter? Ati bar kasha the masaleris, so the ruler of the country should inherit. That means we're giving away the inheritance to some stranger, to the government. So the Gemara says, "Hachi, come in." This is what we meant to say. Maybe the Chumash is telling you like this: Ika beina bas. If there's a son and daughter, loy hires kulei loy hires kulei. None of them get the whole thing. They get both at the same time. In other words, they both inherit it, but not that the son takes precedence over the daughter, over the sister, in case they're both around. If there's no son, you give it to the daughter. If there's no daughter, you give it to the son. But if they're both there, perhaps you split it. Amalei Abai says cannot be what the Chumash is telling you. It's the Chrola Ashmi'in, and do I need a pasuk to say, then what is the Chumash saying? That if there's only one son, that he inherits the entire fortune? So I don't need that, the Chumash saying that in case there is no son, you give it to the sister. And if the case there's only one son and no sister, you give it to the son, of course. So no. So the Gemara says, maybe the Chumash is saying like this: if there is no son, you give it to the daughter, and the daughter has a right to inherit. So the Gemara says, I have another pasuk that teaches you a daughter inherits. So this basically what the Gemara is saying, it's superfluous. This pasuk that says that in case there's no son, the daughter should inherit. The daughter should inherit. That's superfluous because I know from another pasuk a daughter inherits her father. So what is the pasuk saying? That only if there is no son, then the daughter inherits. But if there's a son, even if there is a daughter, the son gets everything, and that's how you know the son inherits before the sister. That's one source. Rabbi Yaakov had another source. Lama Yagara Shem Avinu Metoich Mishpachto Ki Ein Le Ben. The Bnei Slavchit said that we should inherit our father's property because he had no son. Tama de'en leben, only because he didn't have a son. Or yesh leben, but if the daughters of Slach had a brother, Ben Kaidim, they agree that the son takes precedent. So we see a source in the Torah that the son will take precedence and inherit everything in place of his sisters. So the Gemara says, no, V'dilma b'nai slafu hu deka'amrin hachi, nit the Torah nischachka halacha. That maybe the B'nai Slavcha thought of this idea that a son will inherit in front of his sisters. But maybe the Torah would disagree with that. When the Torah was, the Slavcha people made a mistake. Maybe the Torah's idea is that when there's a boy and a girl, they split the Yerusha. So that cannot be a good source. The regional source that we said that a son inherits before the sister is the original idea, the original pasuk that we said before. Ravina says, I have another source that a daughter that a son inherits before the daughter, that before the sister, because the pasuk says Hakarev Elav, Hakarev. Whoever is the closest, that takes the whole inheritance. So the more closer you are to the parent, you get the inheritance, and the son is more closer to the father because in cases of Yi'ud, which is in case the father bought a Emma Avriya, we learned yesterday that really the father should marry that Emma Avriya, that maid, that Jewish girl maid. And in case he doesn't want to marry it, the son marries her. So we see that the son and not the daughter. So the son would takes in certain areas takes the place of the father. And in fact, if a father donated his inherited his property, that is his legacy property that was from his family, he made it hegdish, the father should redeem it. And if not the father, the son redeems it, and it gets returned to the father by Yovel. But that concept of Sdei Achuza only applies to a son and not to a daughter. So we see that a son in the Chumash has more connection to the father, and therefore the Torah says, who gets inheritance? Hakarev, the one that is the most closest in relation, Kaidim, he gets the inheritance, the total inheritance first. My kurva, says the Gemara says, my kurva the beimi bash sheben kam tachas aviv the other stay achuza. He's saying a son is more closer to the father because for yud and stay achuza, and that's why the son takes the Yerusha. That doesn't make a son better than a daughter. The son is not better than the daughter because the reason why the daughter can't marry an Amma Avriya is simply because she's a girl, and the Amma Avriya, the maid, the girl, the Jewish maid, is also a girl. They can't marry each other. So of course, just because the son could marry, that doesn't mean that the daughter is second rate over here. Yada bas lav bas yadahi. A daughter can't do yid and stay achuzanami. And when it comes to the legacy property, in other words, the fact is, what made the son be able to redeem the stay achuza is because he's more important than a brother of the father, because he could do yibum and not the father's brothers. So, but a daughter also, there's no yibum if there's a son, and there's no yibum if there's a daughter. You have to see yesterday's daf. The truth is, the Gemara just pushed it all away because we don't see the closeness of a son versus a daughter. We have to use the first source as where we know a son takes precedence over a daughter. And I'll say another over here. Here's the source. When you have an Evet Kanaini, you should give it to your boys. So if I have an Evet Kanaini, so after 120, it belongs to my boys, not to my daughters. Elamiata, so the Gemara says, whenever you see the word Benechem, it means boys, not girls. It says in the Chumash, when you do mezuzah, right? So you'll get a long life. Only your boys will get the long life, not the girls. You can say only the boys and not the girls. And says the Gemara, bracha shiny. A bracha, of course, there the Chumash means that the boys and girls get this bracha because mezuzah, women are also mechayev mezuzah. But here, by Evet Kanani, the Torah could have written, you should give the Evet Kanani to your offspring. Why does the Torah emphasize sons? Torah is teaching you, when it comes to Yerusha, the sons take precedence over the daughters. And if there's sons there, the daughters get nothing. One minute. We'll end off over here. Brothers that share the same father really are related to each other when it comes to Yerusha, not brothers from the same mother. How do you know that concept? We learn a Gzeir Shava, that the Pasuk says that the brothers were showing off that we're related to each other because we're brothers. And obviously, Yaakov had 4 wives, so they were only related through the father's side. So Malahala min av v'loy min aim, av kamina av v'loy min aim. So there's a pasuk when it talks about Yerusha, and it says brothers. It means the brothers from the father, not the brothers that are related just by the mother. So in order to be a brother in Yerusha, in inheritance, that's only a brother from the father, not from the mother. So the Gemara says, "V'lamali mishpachta v'yarsha." The Parsuk says that only if you're from the same family, Yerusha applies. Ksiv, mishpachas av kruya mishpacha, mishpachas aim inin kruya mishpacha. The father's, if you're related from the father, then you're in the family. If you're related just from the mother, you're not in the family. The Gemara has drushes that shows that when you're related just by your mothers, by sharing common mothers, you don't consider to be in the same mishpacha. And Yerusha, in order for Yerusha to be effective, it has to be from the same mishpacha. So what do I need this pasuk? Of this Gzeir Shava of Yaakov to that only a brother from the father is considered a brother. And so Gemara, you're right. When it comes to Yibam, the brother of the father does the Yibam. A brother from the deceased who have share the same father, then the mitzvah of Yibam applies. But if you have a brother just from the mother, so that brother will not do the mitzvah of Yibam because he's only related by the mother, not the father. And this is what the Gzeir Shava of Bnei Yaakov teach me. Okay, we will continue Be'ezras Hashem tomorrow.